up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Good Theology podcast. I am Jake, and I am here with my co-host David Campbell, and also my longtime friend, co-laborer in the ministry, and fellow vast creator. Yeah, let's go with that. Michael Whittle. What's up, guys? How are you?
Hello.
Y'all doing
How's
good?
everybody doing? Good to see you guys.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. It's been a couple of weeks, I think, since we've been on here. It's just been a little bit of travel on David's end, some busyness on my end as well. It's kept us away from recording our usual podcast, but here we are. We're back.
As
We're
the
back
one
with
who
a special
produces the
episode.
show, it's a little bit longer than 2 weeks, and I
How long
know
was it?
everyone is going to be so excited to hear both of your voices again. Welcome back.
How long has it been?
I don't know. It's probably only been 2 or 3 weeks.
That's what I thought. Let's see. Our last episode, other than today, May 25th. Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. We're doing
A couple
all right.
weeks.
It's not too.
Everybody gets a break. Everybody gets a break.
David, exactly. Yeah, we can't do it every week. David, how are you? You doing well?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, good. Just came back from your worldwide preaching tour.
Well, we had 3 great weeks in England, and then we had a few days holiday in Italy. I did try to set up a preaching engagement just so I could say I was globally apostolically active in Italy. And it kind of reduced to maybe we could have a Bible study over dinner.
Great.
And it really did nothing. So I'm afraid my credentials just, have not been extended any further than they already were, which is a bit of a letdown.
Still no global apostolic title then.
Well, I don't know. Apparently Theos has conferred it on me, but you never know with those guys.
Yeah. Okay. So today's a special episode because we are using this to make an announcement of sorts about a new, what shall we say, Michael, a new vertical or tool. Yeah, that we over here at Vast Media have been working on for the past several months, and it's about ready to be beta tested out in the world. And we've already had a grip of interest off of one seemingly innocent tweet from Michael over the weekend, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Mike, why don't you share with everybody about this tool, because it's very pertinent to a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. We've produced, which is kind of crazy. Vast has produced, as a whole collective, probably close to 400 podcast episodes in the past couple of years, and all the associated content with it. We've probably talked to 30 or 40 different podcasters. We've probably talked to 50 different pastors. And, we've always just been about getting really strong, theologically sound content into the world so that people could think about their faith. And so one of the things we found is that there were actually a lot of local church pastors that had podcasts just like this, as well as a lot of faith-based podcasters. And part of the barrier to entry is sometimes it's hard to record, sometimes it's hard to edit. And then on the back end of that, sometimes it's really difficult to turn that podcast into all the other accompanying content that comes along with it. So we have created a product called Pulpit AI, which you can check out on pulpitai.com. And basically it is a tool that, using AI, we say AI generated, human perfected, you can upload the audio from your sermon or your podcast or both. And this sort of proprietary artificial intelligence model that specializes in analyzing audio can pull a whole bunch of different things from that. Could be highlights, it could be a summary, it could be an outline, it could be a devotional, a tweet, a blog, you name it. It essentially just helps turn your sermon into accompanying content, and really in the click of a button using artificial intelligence. So that's what it does. And you can go to the website right now, sign up just to get all the updates on the product we're working on, what a public launch is going to look like. But we're really excited about it.
Yeah, we are, because it is going to be something very helpful for people who are on, the small to medium end of things when it comes to the podcasting world, or maybe they're a pastor, leader in their church, that don't have all of the funding necessarily to have adequate staffs to produce all of this supporting content. Whether that's producing a post to go up on your Instagram or to write the show notes for your episode that you put together, this tool can be very helpful for that. So
can I share the one thing that made us realize this was going to be really helpful for churches specifically?
Yeah.
You had been doing a series here at our church on anxiety, and we uploaded the sermon to this platform. We uploaded the sermon, it analyzed the audio, and then we typed into the prompt, using the themes from this sermon, write a casual sounding text message that somebody could send to a friend, inviting them to church next week to listen to this series on anxiety. And literally in 10 seconds was a text message taking into account the themes from the sermon that someone could literally copy, paste, edit, and send to a friend. So that's like the most practical application. And so when we read that, we were like, wow, this really has the ability to not just help content get out there, but actually help resource church members with stuff based on their pastor's sermon. So that's like a practical example of one of the things you can do.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So
I'm done selling now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
PulpitAI.com. It's a tool that'll be very useful for church staffs and podcasters for creating all of the supporting content that goes along with the thing that they've already created. And I think on the note of what you said in terms of AI generated, human perfected, I would say, to be even more specific, it is human generated, human created stuff, whether that be a sermon or a podcast, that then the AI analyzes to help draw out the supporting content that goes along with that then you, as the human, put the final stamp on and perfect and finalize before you put it out into the world. So you tweeted about this over the weekend in how many followers do you have on Twitter, Michael?
I don't know, like not maybe 800. And
800.
I tweet about things like the Dallas Cowboys and memes, and there's no through line. I'm not a Twitter thought leader,
So you tweeted about this tool that we've been working on, and which is very useful to us as people who run this business fast, because we will use this personally all of the time for, as you said, the hundreds of podcast episodes that we put out. And so you tweeted about it, for people to signal any interest that they had in terms of helping us beta test it. Within 24 hours, how many times had your tweet been viewed?
Something like 150,000.
So you had this tweet go viral with a lot of excitement. Like we had probably 250 people submit their email, really pumped on being able to use this.
Yep, wanting to test it, and interested in what we're doing, yeah.
Yeah. And then also you had a variety of people push back on it as well, a lot of whom misunderstood what it is that the tool does. A lot of people saying that sermons should not be written by AI, which 100%, yes, we agree completely. But that's not what this does, even remotely. And so let's talk about that a little bit, because that was, I know, a really fascinating experience for you over the weekend. And what do we want to say in response?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually really funny. I was sitting around I think it was Tuesday, and I was like, let's just put up a landing page and just share with our friends and see if there's anybody interested. So I literally bought a website template for like $18. I built the thing myself. I put it up online, and on Friday at 6 p.m. I just tweeted, here's this thing we've been working on. We think it's going to be a game-changing tool for pastors, and went to bed and really didn't think much of it. And then woke up the next morning to just a onslaught. And what had happened is I was introduced to this new corner of Twitter where you have this academia. And so what happened was there was a couple of really big accounts that had more than 100,000 followers who saw this, retweeted it without actually looking at what it did, and thought that it was an AI sermon writer. Both of those accounts actually came back later without me even asking them to, and corrected what they initially said, which was awesome. But yeah, it exploded. And so there was two things happening. It was going viral on Twitter, and then my inbox was just getting pinged literally every couple of minutes with a new email of someone signing up for wanting to use this thing. So yeah, I think it was funny. I mean,
my wife told me that your wife told her that she had sent you to the grocery store on like a basic like grocery pickup, like milk and eggs kind of thing, and you were gone for an hour and a half because you were sitting in your car responding to emails and DMs.
I was. It was absolutely hilarious. But what it did is it really did touch on this this conversation that apparently has been being had quietly that now is, I guess out in the open of like, what is this? Is it bad? Is it good? Should churches use it? Should they not? And also it honestly showed some serious misunderstanding as to what this kind of technology actually can do. I had Christian publishers reach out to me, not liking it. It was really fascinating. And honestly, even
you put the title on it, Pulpit AI, then you're setting yourself up.
I did. I set myself up.
Name didn't help ourselves.
I have to say that, AI might generate better sermon content than a few sermons I've heard in my time.
I love that you saw that. I was talking to Chris Palmer this morning as I called you, sir, and Chris Palmer, just going like, hey, is there anything that I'm actually missing here? Like, am I doing, are we thinking about this wrong? And Chris goes, you could probably train AI to exegete scripture better than most pastors. So, if you got to do what you got to do, go ahead and do it. So anyways, our simple tool to help social media managers at churches create social posts based upon their pastor's sermon ignited this debate on Twitter that, I think is a worthwhile debate, for sure. So here we are. And now we've got this product. We are working tirelessly to get to all these folks that want to try it.
So let's kind of like steelman the pushback for a moment, because I think that's helpful to have a conversation. So obviously you have misunderstanding in terms of what the tool does, and there's been some clarity there. But then you even have like a swath of people that understanding, I think, to some degree, what it is AI does and what this tool specifically will do, that would still push back. Can you kind of summarize some of those arguments for us?
Sure. Yes. Some of the arguments were straight up technology related, right? I had an Episcopalian blogger tell me that demons are in ChatGPT, right? So there's like people that went that direction with it. The actually the most practical and actually something that I do understand the perspective on is a sermon isn't content. So people actually really, really took issue with us saying we could turn a sermon into content, right? Or that a sermon was simply anything other than a message preached from a pastor to a congregation at a certain moment in time, and an attempt to turn it into anything else actually makes it not a sermon in the first place.
So with these people,
there was people
also
upset about calling this content it was, how dare you turn a sermon into content?
Right.
Was a huge piece of it.
Would those same people also take issue with like a human writing a tweet that is a quote from a sermon and posting that on Instagram, because that is technically content, that quote?
Correct.
They would have an issue with that.
It seemed to me that there was some issue with having a machine speak in their mind on behalf of God or on behalf of his scriptures, even if it is taken from a human-generated sermon.
Right.
A lot of idiots speak on behalf of God, or claim to.
I'm just trying to understand the issue. Like, so is it the fact that there's a machine that is aiding that process, or is it the fact that you're taking a piece of a sermon and putting it online as a piece of content?
So that's where,
if I'm working at some large church that has a staff of, let's say, 20 people, some of these really, really large churches probably have larger staffs than that are dedicated solely to creating quote unquote content based upon what the pastor's preaching, or like, are they also against
niche? I think it's a niche thing that whoever this person was has a view of preaching as a kind of an existential event, obviously, that takes place between the preacher and the congregation in the moment, and it isn't valid for anything outside of that moment. And I don't think any of us could relate to that. I mean,
Right.
Spurgeon's certainly couldn't, all the way up to Martin Lloyd-Jones or Matt Chandler. You know, everybody's had their sermons published
Right.
in some way or another. So it seems to me that
Right. Because by that definition, even putting your sermon on a podcast is right.
Yeah, it's only valid in the moment, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. It could be I mean, Mike referenced Episcopalians. It could be something in that tradition. I don't know, but even then, you know, even when the Pope, the Pope writes encyclicals, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think it's something outside of our circle anyway, and but I just think it's interesting. The whole thing is interesting. I think, you know, I think Mike just cooked this up as a publicity stunt, to be honest. And let's be frank, it's worked.
It's worked.
So I think you should, you know, plug it a little bit more. You know,
we plan to. We plan to.
So here, can I just read one?
Yeah,
I want to read
go
one because I think this is you know, it's interesting because some people gave actually very thoughtful, like, critiques and thoughts around all of it. But someone said, "I'm conflicted about this tool. It's for adapting sermons into secondary format, transcripts, study questions, notes, not writing sermons. Transcription of sermons is potentially a good use of AI, but reducing the ministry of the word to content creation is a big mistake." So that was what I found was so interesting. And I actually would want both of your just thoughts on that. Like, are we just playing like this kind of funny game with words when
I think, like, to me, it's just like an argument of terms.
Yeah. What is if a sermon is something completely different from content, quote unquote, then what content does a sermon have? Like, what are they talking about? I'm not sure I get it. Is it illegitimate to bring applications? Is it illegitimate for, supposing you had a member of the congregation, for instance, that was delegated to sit in the congregation and
Transcribe.
make up responses, or for that matter, you know, people that sit there and put stuff as the preacher is going on social media. Like, is that content creation? Is that wrong?
Right.
I mean, is it wrong for, you know, people to go out to a restaurant after church and discuss what the pastor was preaching and go through it? Is that some form of content creation or something? I don't even get that. I think I don't understand what people like that are getting at. I can understand the objection, you know, you don't want a computer writing your sermons, but if all you're doing is taking stuff out of it, you know, to be utilized in the form of a study question or a tweet or an Instagram post or something, you know, or even to give a little summary of the message that could be distributed to members of the congregation. The check on it is that if the preacher should, under certain circumstances, have some supervision of the content that goes out. You know, I wouldn't want, even if it was artificially generated, I'd want to see what the computer had generated out of my content, because it might have drawn an accurate point, but it might not have been the main point that I wanted to make.
Right. But I run into that working with humans as well. Like, sometimes we'll put quotes up from a sermon of mine, and I'm like, oh man, wish they wouldn't have chosen that. Or they'll put up a clip, and I'm like, I probably wouldn't have picked that moment. And so I think either way, you're going to run into that issue. And I agree with David. To me, it seems like we're splitting hairs over terms here, and I can't say that I understand it, except to say that perhaps some of these people have really strict boundaries in terms of what they're comfortable using a sermon for beyond the moment it is preached. And so to me, I see all of this stuff as supporting. Even if you were to say, hey, can you put out a 200-word blog that summarizes the main ideas of this sermon that I could take and go and work from? To me, that's helpful. Time is precious. We only have so much of it. Many preachers are already putting 10, 15 hours a week into writing their sermon. For that to have life beyond that moment, and to help reach more people, or to have reach beyond that moment, I think is helpful. So I can't understand the critique as I hear it.
Another one that was interesting was, you just said something about it. Time is valuable, and there was a few people that were like, okay, well, this is just going to eliminate a job from someone, right? And I guess my thought on that would be, in most churches that would use this, most churches would not have a full-time media person or social media person or communications person. That person is doing probably 3 or 4 different jobs. And so in my mind, if someone's job can be to, instead of sitting watching an entire sermon and figuring out the points to pull, they can run it through something like this, and then have content to then have it repurposed. That then frees that person up to do, in my opinion, more meaningful ministry, frankly, than figuring out what to put on social media. Would both of you, as people who are and have been senior pastors, how do you think about that? Certainly,
100%.
No one's going to say, "Oh,
100%.
we don't need your job. We don't need your job anymore because you're not writing original social content."
No,
right?
No. Like we have a staff, I think, of eight people or so, and all of them wear multiple hats. And something like an Instagram post, like that takes time. And so if this is going to free up their time so that they're not spending as much of it on something like this, that's a blessing for them.
And what about the pastors of small churches, which, still the average church in the United States, for instance, has an attendance of, I think, less than 100 people.
It's like 70 or 80.
So what about all that vast multitude where the pastor has to do everything? Surely this is a massive potential gift to small churches where, we're not talking about a gift to the churches with multiple staff and social media people. We're talking about a massive gift to small churches where the pastor has to do all this himself and just doesn't have the time to do it, so it doesn't get done. So this creates something that would never have existed otherwise. I mean, I did blogs for about 5 years, and a lot of them were condensed versions of sermons that I'd given.
Right.
And if I'd had a tool like this, I would have used it. I didn't have a PA, somebody to do this. I had to do it all myself. And so, I would have really appreciated it. I mean, I would have looked at the finished product and edited it myself or whatever, but it would have just saved me a lot of time, and I would have been very grateful for it.
Exactly.
So full marks to you, Mike. Just have a forehead of flint, pay no attention, to the criticism, and reap in all the publicity you can.
I think once people use it and they see how practically beneficial it is and how it actually aids what they do and helps their job, I think people will see that. There are a certain swath of people that are going to be of a different ilk, a purist in some sense, I don't even know if that's the right word, but just have a different view as to what should be done with a sermon after the fact. And they won't be convinced, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be for everybody. But I think the hundreds of people that have shown interest, they can obviously see the potential benefit for how it makes parts of their job more efficient and allows them to focus their time on more important, should I say, aspects of ministry. Not to mention as well, this is just as much for podcasters. So even taking something like this, like the fact that we could take this podcast after the fact and use this tool to help write a summary of the show, any other supporting content that we wanted to go along with it, pulling clips, stuff like that. Like that's going to be hugely beneficial to actual content creators, not
Right.
pastors, not preachers.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. Anyone that's a faith-based creator of any kind and has audio, and at some point here in the next few months, video as well, will be able to use this for any kind of content that they want to create.
Let's kind of zoom out a little bit and have a larger conversation, because AI is just the newest thing in terms of tech. I saw over the weekend, Apple announced their, what's it called, Mike? Do you know? Their Vision Pro, I think that's what it is. Did you see this?
Oh, yeah, their VR. Is it the VR goggles?
Is VR or augmented reality or whatever it is. You put on these goggles and now all of a sudden your actual world is intermingled with your digital life. And so technology is going to keep advancing. Obviously, the conversation around ethical use of technology, generally speaking, and specifically within Christianity, is a necessary conversation that we'll need to be actively engaged in for as long as we are using technology. That's been the case for every technological usage and breakthrough ever since the dawn of mankind. David, could you help us think through the Christian use of tech, generally speaking, and are there any kind of principles that should be abided by in terms of helping us determine whether or not something is a completely no-go zone, or if there's always the potential, or almost always the potential, to redeem a piece of tech if it was created, let's say, for neutral purposes, non-violent purposes?
Well, I work on the assumption that all wisdom comes from God in the end. And so the intelligence that we have and how we develop it comes from God. So there's always potentially something redemptive in any new thing that comes our way. I mean, you could argue, I suppose, about the atomic bomb or something like that. But even there, in the development of nuclear technology has come tons of medical applications and all sorts of good things. So something can be used for good or for bad. But I think that as Christians who believe that all creativity and the ability to think, the ability to develop anything at any capacity, in any area of life, comes from God. Therefore, we should be the first people to jump in, at least trying to figure out how it can be used for good. So I'm a big advocate of that. I think that with technology, I think Christians should be the first people in. They should learn how to handle it better than anybody else. It should be used for the glory of God. And in the process of it, we simply use discernment so that, it's used redemptively in a way that's glorifying to God and helpful to people. But to stick our head in the sand and to be afraid of it that's a bad strategy, because people who don't have the well-being of other people in mind are certainly going to get a hold of the technology. And this has been, a wider debate in the media over artificial intelligence, where on the one hand, people in the West are saying, well, we have to put boundaries around this and be very careful in the development of it. On the other hand, people are saying, well, look, over in China and Russia and goodness knows where else, there is no such compunction. They're full steam ahead. And if we lag behind, then we're going to find ourselves outfoxed in a problem here. So I think that we need to jump in and master these kind of things and to use them for good as much as possible, because whether we like it or not, AI is here and it ain't going to go away. So the way, for our job as Christians is to try to become as conversant with it as we possibly can, to turn it to God's glory and to good. That, and I say that as a techno idiot. I couldn't even send an email to my bank today in support of my mortgage application because I couldn't find what I'd done with the downloads. And I Googled, how do you find downloads on a MacBook? And I got lost in that. So, I need a little bit of artificial.
It would have been really helpful. There's some AI.
Well, there wasn't much natural intelligence, so I need some artificial. Anyhow, in principle, that's what I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. So, in Revelation, in chapter 18, it says this, beginning in let's start in verse 2. With a mighty voice, he shouted, he here being the angel previously mentioned in verse 1. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxury. So John has a warning here about Babylon, and he goes on to say, come out of her, come out of Babylon, my people, which from memory is a call back to Jeremiah's warning to the actual Israelites to come out of Babylon, to rebuild Jerusalem, so that you will not share in her sins, and so that you will not receive any of her plagues. So we could go on. So John draws a very stark picture here in terms of Babylon, in terms of her destiny, and there's this call for Christians to come out of Babylon. I've been reading quite a bit about the early church, really over the last few years, most recently a fascinating book called The Patient Ferment of the Early Church, which I'm really enjoying. And it talks quite a bit about how Christians were heavily engaged in business in the first century, and part of their witness was to be distinctly Christian in their business dealings. So help us kind of understand this a bit. Where's John coming from? What's he asking us to do? Or really, what's the angel asking us to do or commanding us to do here? And how might that have any bearing in terms of Christian use of technology, especially as technology is used in the business realm?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I go back to what I said before, that, for instance, money is a neutral commodity from a spiritual point of view. People always say, oh, no, money's the root of all evil. That's not what Paul said at all. He said the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, not the only root, but it's the love of money. So it's what you do with money that's the problem. And in the, what John was writing into in Revelation was a corrupt world system where the Romans had built the economy and put Caesar worship on top of the economy so that you couldn't participate in the economy unless you also worship Caesar. And this is where we get everything down to the mark of the beast and not buying and selling. It's got nothing to do with, Bill Gates or the rapture or anything ridiculous stuff like that. It's set in the context of the first century. Well, you introduced Revelation, so you expecting me to make a comment on it. So
no, that's exactly why I'm talking to you about it.
So what John is saying is, you can't get involved in a system where there's an ungodly use of money. So how do you, what do you do then? You can't withdraw from society altogether. You just have to handle it properly. Jesus said in relation to money, he that is faithful in a few things, if you're not faithful in what belongs to another, don't expect to be given what belongs to you. That was in the context of money. Jesus taught an enormous amount about money. There are 2,000 verses in the Bible about money. There's only 500 in prayer and 500 in faith, give or take. So the question isn't, we run away from money. The question is we have to run toward the issue of handling money and handling it properly. Same with technology. You use it to the glory of God. We use money to the glory of God. We need kingdom wealth generators to generate money for the kingdom. There are people who know how to handle money in a right way. Same with technology. We need people who will handle technology and master it and use it to the glory of God in a way that serves people. So, I think
there's a very
What you
specific
asked
context
in
here
this last-
in terms of the in terms of the economics here in John's world. Caesar worship was demanded, and if you did not comply to the worship of Caesar, that brought about economic disadvantages to you. So the temptation, therefore, is to worship
compromise.
Caesar and compromise. And so that is something very distinct. And we would say without hesitation at all that if there were anything that demanded that we introduce idolatry into our lives and deny that Jesus alone is Lord, then that would be completely non-permissible as a Christian.
Right. But even then, money wasn't the issue.
Right.
The issue was idolatry. And money was just a tool that the Romans used
to bring about that idolatry.
Yeah, to bring about the idolatry.
Yeah. So if for some reason the doorway into using a certain piece of technology required that you pronounce your faith, then by all means walk away from the technology. But that is not at all what's going on here. So, and that's not to say that some technologies, that are created for solely evil purposes. There's I'm sure there's things that should not be redeemed, cannot be redeemed.
Well, it's hard to say, because a security camera can prevent crime in a free country, democratic country. In an authoritarian country, the same security camera is used as a tool of repression.
Right.
And so it's a neutral thing in itself. The question is, how is it used?
Right. Mike,
would you both say? Well, I was just going to say that was what somebody asked me over the weekend. Just point blank is, do I believe technology is neutral? My answer to that question was yes, and they were appalled that I would think that. I guess quickly, what do both of you guys think about that? Is technology neutral?
Well, hang on. How did they ask you this question?
Literally straight up, is technology neutral?
No. But they walked up to you face to face and asked you that question?
No. On via Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, this person who thinks that technology is immoral tweeted at you?
Right.
Correct. From what? From a phone? From a piece of technology?
There you go.
Come on. So unless they're willing to say that they themselves are complicit and participating in an evil act by tweeting,
exactly.
What are we talking about here?
Well, some people just take stupidity to a different level, but I don't know.
Am I misunderstanding that?
That's what I know. That's what when they asked me the question, I thought I must be misunderstanding something in this conversation, because I can't wrap we were literally on a Twitter Spaces where there was 30 people on Twitter, all using audio via Twitter to have a conversation. And it was a fascinating question and a fascinating response. And I just said, well, of course it is, and thought that most sensible people thought the same thing,
Right. But it surprised me at one bit if it's tied into dispensationalism and, like the microchip sort of mentality, where it's all, the New World Order and all of this kind of thing. And people get into this mindset and fear, focus, and they think all of this is evil and wrong, even while they're using it, because it's not an intelligent, it's a fear focus. It's not an intelligent approach to it. So,
right.
But what would be tragic is if Christians walked away from technology. I mean, that's what the Amish have done, and they're trundling around in their horse and buggy still. Now, the funny thing is that, meanwhile, in the back 40, they've got sophisticated factories turning out, you name it, under diesel generators, because they've got a special disposition to, a special permission to be able to do it. But, we really, are we really going to be modern day Amish people who say, well, we're not going to participate in that? And like you say, then turn your phone off, throw it away, and and be consistent. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I wonder if that connects to the demons thing that you mentioned earlier about ChatGPT having demons in it. Like, is that like a powers and principalities thing?
I mean, this was the same person that said she had an encounter on ChatGPT that was demonic with the demons.
Right. Yeah. Is that possible, David? Like, is that to me, like, the powers and principalities thing in Paul's mind is probably connected to the political realm. Is there any? I
think the powers and principalities are, first of all, heavenly, supernatural, demonic.
Yeah, but like kind of working behind the scenes to,
Well, you can. I mean, the idea of the beast in Revelation is demonic control, where demonic forces use human governments to oppress God's people.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I mean, so you could, you could have artificial intelligence being used in a wrong way,
right?
And there would be a demonic influence behind that. But the demonic influence comes from the human being who is generating who has initiated the whole process, not from the thing in itself.
So it's a little bit like the Christians in government conversation. Like, should Christians be in politics? Well, demons are involved in politics, so therefore Christians should back away. No, that's not our argument at all. We would say, well, all the more reason why Christians should be engaged in the socio-political realm to bring about positive outcomes and godly outcomes, as opposed to the opposite. So to me, I would see an apples to apples correlation here in the same application for tech. Are we all agreed on that? I'm getting a nod from David.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. This is great. Guys, check out pulpitai.com. And
I thought you were teeing him up for the response there. I was just keeping my mouth shut.
Sometimes I am teeing David up for a response, but then he just kind of nods at me and goes, "Yeah, that's right." He's like, "I don't need to say it any other way."
I love that.
I have great confidence in your wisdom.
Pulpitai.com. It won't write your sermon for you. Or at least that's not our intention. But you can have lots of things write your sermon for you these days. So, you do what you want. But that's not what we're into.
Right.
We are into helping people create supporting content for the stuff that they've already worked so hard to create. So check it out. Let us know if you're interested, and maybe it'll be helpful for you. Thanks so much, Mike. Thank you, Dr. David. We love you. And we'll see you all next week on Good Theology. Peace.